Now for Crystal Palace, it's been something of an emotional rollercoaster since, of course, their fairy tale ending to last season, winning the FA Cup at Wembley, their first ever major trophy in football, defeating Manchester City of all teams by a 0-0 at Wembley, and ultimately, therefore, qualifying for the Europa League, the first time that they would play in Europe in the club's history. And yet, since then, there's been so many issues regarding whether the club can actually play in the Europa League because, of course, one of their shareholders at the club owns part of another club in Europe, and that contradicts UEFA rules when it comes to two clubs playing in the same competition because, of course, Lyon qualified also for the Europa League last season, finishing 6th in Ligue 1 in France. However, Lyon have just been relegated because of financial difficulties to Ligue 2 in France, and so where does this leave Crystal Palace? It's very hard to tell at the moment. Of course, before this happened, they were in discussions with UEFA and trying to get themselves sorted in terms of playing in the Europa League, and now the shareholder who did own part of Palace and Lyon has now sold up, or is trying to sell up at least his shares in Palace. That's pending Premier League approval at the moment. But now with Lyon having gone down in France because of financial difficulties and irregularities, does that make things easier for Palace? Well, that remains to be seen. So let's go now to our London sport correspondent, Charles Hague-Jones. Charles, what is the latest on this situation? Have Palace managed to get themselves into the Europa League, or are things at least looking good because of Lyon's relegation and the fact that also their shareholder has managed to, or seems to be on the brink at least, of selling up his shares in the club? It seems a complicated situation, but what is the current plan at the moment?
Yes, it's obviously a bit of a sticky situation now. Obviously, Crystal Palace, an incredible FA Cup triumph, beating Manchester City in the final, beating Aston Villa before that, and having an amazing run. The likes of Eberechi Eze, unbelievable across that FA Cup campaign, and their first major tournament win in their history as well. So an incredible season, but it could all sort of come falling down due to John Textor's ownership in Lyon, who have also qualified for the Europa League, which violates UEFA's rules. Basically, he has stake overlaps, which means he has percentage ownership in two clubs who are both in the same competition, which means it's a massive sort of downfall for Palace if that's to continue. Obviously, Lyon did end up relegated, which could be a possible lifesaver. It means they are possibly likely to be disqualified from Europe, which means there is a lifeline for Palace. Obviously, it's still a bit up in the air at the moment. The case is ongoing. But yeah, take nothing away from Palace and qualifying for the Europa League. They fully deserve it. John Textor was sort of really panicking in terms of trying to sell. But Lyon's relegation due to huge debt, and I mean, this is £400 million or so, is likely to automatically disqualify them from Europe, which means we will go ahead as planned. Palace will be in the Europa League. That will remove any conflict for them. It means Nottingham Forest will stay as the club who are waiting to possibly jump in Palace's seat if they were to move down. So it means Forest will likely stay in the Conference League, especially with multi-club investors being more common across Europe. So they need to get this sorted for sure. In summary, their Europa League future sort of hinges on resolving the ownership rules and Texas stake sales, and then Lyon's future are also key wildcards. So Palace will be looking out for this one. It's a massive case. It's something that Palace need to get right and want to get right for moving forward. Oliver Glasner has a great future and a great squad at Crystal Palace as well. So hopefully they are in Europe next season and really give that a good go as well, because who knows, with Crystal Palace hitting the ground running with their first ever trophy, who knows, there could be more to come in London for them as well. So massive case, and hopefully it's resolved sooner rather than later.